local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is Chris Sagaasor. Chris is the director of the Utica Public Library, has been since 2017. And we're going to be talking about the library and all the kinds of things that are going on down there. But first, we're going to say welcome. Chris, good to see you again.
You as well. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Chris, one of the things that I ask a lot of people in your position is how they cope during COVID, how they're coming back from COVID. You were closed for quite a while, and then you were open by appointment.
Yep.
I can't imagine that went too well.
Well, the good news is that we seem to be coming out of what was the worst of it. But as you said, we had to adjust our services entirely. Being closed so nobody could come in was a challenge and a problem. And we tried to figure out creative ways to allow people to get what they needed and also protect them and protect us before we knew what those rules were. So we went from being open about 60 hours a week to 40 hours for probably a year and a half or so of the pandemic. Limited appointment-based services. You could come into the building, but you had to leave after a certain time. This past January, we were able to reopen again up to 55 hours, which is what we're required to be open for the state. No more appointments. So it's in the last 3 months, we've probably doubled, and then on an average doubled to tripled the amount of people who are coming in, the amount of books that are being checked out, computer usage. Some days we've quadrupled what we were doing 3 to 6 months ago.
And the hours now are what, Chris?
So we're actually open again. We're open 4 nights. We were only open 3 nights pre-pandemic. We're open from 9 to 8 Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5 Friday, and we're open 3 hours on Saturday morning, 9:30 to 12:30.
Is that true for all the services? For example, is the children's library on the same schedule as the main library?
Yep. Everything is available and operational every hour that we're open. So children's room especially, they've seen a school break a couple weeks ago. It was great. It felt like 2019 again, which was nice.
Somebody was telling me the other day, Chris, they're in a public service capacity as you are, was saying that people got used to doing things online and they're not seeing people come back because they're used to doing things online.
Yeah, I think we've seen, what we have seen is more people come into our space and use our Wi-Fi. We significantly increased our capacity in the building as well as outside the building. So we now have Wi-Fi extenders that extend a couple blocks into the neighborhood either side of the library. That usage has increased. So we're still finding that people access stuff electronically, including library resources. We now spend 50% of our materials budget, which is DVDs, books, things that you used to transact across a desk. 50% of that budget now is in electronic content that people can access from home or a device if they have internet access.
So do I understand correctly that if somebody wants to watch a movie, they can't do that without coming in?
They can't do that. There are services available for people to stream and download movies. They're prohibitively expensive, but audiobooks, ebooks, magazines, we have a robust magazine database, but just the number of ebooks that people are checking out from our collection, as well as our investment in, we're actually adding a couple new resources. We should have them launched by June. We're doing an online, it's called Comics Plus. It's an award-winning database that has graphic novels and comic books, which we check out a lot of those. And the thing with a lot of that material, it doesn't last long in print form because it's heavily used by youth. Not only youth, a lot of adults like that format too. Yeah. But that we think that will add to the longevity of the collection and the ability for others to access it. And we're adding the New York Times on site, so full access to the New York Times. There's going to be a Spanish language edition, an international edition. I believe there's an edition in Mandarin. That will be available on site. We're adding New York Times Cooking and New York Times Games. If you have a Utica Public Library card and you live in Utica, you'll be able to access that remotely as well.
That's quite a savings because the New York Times has gotten quite expensive, as have a lot of newspapers, so
Yeah.
that's a big savings for somebody that wants to read the Times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we got a really good price, and we're happy to be able to provide new electronic content, especially the variety of languages and other information. There's classroom resources. We think teachers will be attracted to the extra stuff that does come with it.
Now, you mentioned the comics, and I know you like partnering up with other organizations. In fact, we'll talk about that in a second. But there is that, his name just went out of my mind, but local gentleman with the American Cancer Society, he's been a guest on this show many times, and he puts on Comic-Con over at MV. Maybe that's something.
Yeah, well, we used to do a pop culture convention thing at the library that we aren't going to do anymore, so I suspect that we'll re-engage with the Comic-Con at MV. I purchased comics at Ravenswood, have since I was a kid. The guy who runs Ravenswood is a former classmate of mine, so it's nice to have connections in the print shopping world. But this is a great product. My graphic novel readers and staff who are well versed in that content area are really excited about being able to provide this to the public too.
One of the things with electronics is you can actually ask a question of a reference librarian, can you not?
Yeah, absolutely. We still get a number. I mean, the amount of email questions we get is still robust. And I think sometimes the reality is that there is still a vast amount of information that is not available online, especially when it comes to genealogy and local history and lookups. There isn't electronic resources indexed in the same way and used in the same way that the old microfilm is. And also, people get the context different when you do the original source microfilm research as opposed to looking at just mere text online.
But when you talk about that, my mind goes back to Judge John Walsh, who, when he retired from the bench in Utica, I remember every time I was in the library, which was often in those days, he was always there on those microfilm readers, going back through those old newspapers.
Yeah, that people still use that. We still use it often to do research. We actually, we're going to be working with the History Center and SUNY Poly. SUNY Poly has digitized some old Utica newspapers. We have some old foreign language Utica newspapers, as well as the OD, the press, etc. We want to collaborate so that we aren't repeating our efforts, but we would like to get to a point where we can figure out what do we digitize, what do we save, because the film does deteriorate. We have concerns about its longevity. We have started conversations. We hope to have something concrete, I would say within the next year, where people know where they can get what papers, even if they just can stop at one spot to say, oh, this is what they have at the History Center, this is what they have at the library, and then we can work on expanding access digitally into the future.
The collection at the Utica Public Library of magazines, I remember it used to be in the side room there on the Genesee Street side, filled with magazines.
Yep.
Not so much anymore.
No, now we have, the Mid-York Library System provides an online magazine database where any cardholder in the system can essentially download the title to their phone, their desktop PC. We still do provide some browsing periodicals, nothing like it used to be, but the interesting thing is we were encouraged by the fact that the Daily Sentinel started publishing and has a Utica component. We added that to our collection. We of course still get the OD, Times, the Wall Street Journal. People still want to touch the material.
I'm one of them. Hang on one second. Chris Sagaas is our guest. We're talking Utica Public Library because he's the director. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Chris Sagaas is our guest. Chris is the director of the Utica Public Library. I remember, don't I recall accurately, Chris, they used to call him head librarian, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day,
They
head
did.
librarian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't really call anybody. Now we're just a lot of librarians, and then really what I always say to the staff, and they know this too, is that when people come in, we're all librarians.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't necessarily have a lot of titles unless
Yeah.
it's like unless there's something big and important and trouble I got to deal with. Then it's like you got to talk to the director. That's when titles come to play.
Talking about old days, head librarians, the Utica Library the Utica Public Library wasn't always Utica Public Library. It started off as the Utica Library, if I recall my history correctly, 1825.
That's correct.
But it was a subscription library with 1,000 books.
Yeah.
What was a subscription library?
Well, way back when public libraries started, they didn't include public in the name because you had to pay a fee to be eligible to borrow the books. And then people started to realize that was much like today. We talk about access to information and equity of access to knowledge. People realized and started a movement to democratize access, and then it became, well, you can all get the same information, but even unlike now, you couldn't actually go into the stacks and get it. Somebody had to go get it for you and then bring it back. They didn't want people to put stuff back in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. We still have those concerns, but it's a lot more freeing to have people go look for their own information.
Yeah. In fact, the last time I was at a library, I was out of town. I was just out of town, and they had a sign, and it said, in effect, don't put the books back.
Yeah.
Leave them here. We'll put them back.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were trying to make it easy for people. They were trying to make sure it got put back in the right place.
Yeah. If you have a Dewey Decimal number off, or a letter in the author's last name off, and it's misshelved, it's not really easy to find it.
Yeah, I was going to, yeah.
Especially in our collection, we have 30,000 plus circulating materials on 4 different circulating floors of items. It's not always easy to find it.
Yeah. As the library, I think it was Justice Rathbone, who was a local attorney, who started this in 1825. And then what happened?
Well, it kind of, expanded a little bit. The library was in multiple locations at one point in its history. The big flagship building that we still occupy and have for 118 years, was donated. The land was donated for the purposes of a library, and it's been a library since 1904.
That was the Proctor's, wasn't it?
Proctor's, exactly, yeah. I think any important architectural or land that was here has their name tied to it, which is great. But there was a East Utica branch. One of my librarians used to work there, who still works for us. And there was a different downtown branch as well, but that preceded both.
Yeah. Well, actually, I remember the East Utica Library.
Yeah.
And I think it's owned privately now and turned into a bed and breakfast.
Yeah, and it was a restaurant at some point.
Yeah.
Right over by Ventura's, which is how that's the landmark I always think of. It's right on that almost diagonal in the corner. But yeah, there was a point, I think probably within the last 5 years, where I was near there, and there were still books inside on the shelves, which I'm sure they're.
Yeah.
We're not going to get them back.
Yeah.
And they could be gone by this point. So.
Yeah. The decisions on books. Who makes that decision on what books to acquire?
Well, all of our librarians and some of our paraprofessional staff we get a budget that we tell them what they can purchase from. We have selection criteria. We want stuff to be current, timely, authoritative. We want it to represent the interests and of our community, as well as what we think is going on in the world. So all of our professional and paraprofessional staff have selection areas. They pick books. They get rid of books when they're old, which is the life cycle of the book is kind of a thing we've developed. We constantly look at what's there. Does it earn its place on the shelf? And then there are things that haven't circulated in a long time that we still think are valuable and important as part of the canon, such as it is, and then we'll keep those titles. But oftentimes, we want to make sure that somebody's using it or that it's current. We don't want to have camping directories from the 70s on our shelves.
You remind me of something. There's a device where you can actually, if you go online, you can order your books. Maybe you can even do it in-house, where the system, the Mid-York system, will keep track of all the books you've read, and then you can go back and look at that?
Yeah, there's a reading list that you can kind of keep. The system doesn't necessarily track stuff you checked out 6 months ago. We don't store that information, but within your account, I believe you can set up stuff I've read, reading lists that you then access and go back to, but it's not information that we store at the system level to do anything with. Kind of once you return a book, there's really no record as far as the library is concerned that you'd ever taken it out.
Yeah, in today's day and age, I don't know, something popped up on my computer the other day and I couldn't believe it. It was from years ago. I don't know. It seems to me that once you put something into a computer somewhere, it's going to exist. How about the immigrant community that has come into our area? Have you made adjustments for that?
Well, we have a modest collection of circulating materials in non-English language, in the non-English languages. We need to add to that. We've actually kind of re-engaged with the center over the last couple months. We're doing a really cool project that's going to help people who are coming through the center, their clients, engage with the library by using tablets that kind of orient them to the building. We got ARPA federal funding to pay for a translation service that the center has as well.
You're talking about the Refugee Center?
Yes, sorry, the Refugee Center. So there's all of these orientation materials are going to be in a variety of languages. The most spoken non-English languages in Utica are included in that, including Pashto and Dari, which are, I believe, the two most prevalent languages spoken by Afghanis. And we have also provided meeting room space for people coming through the Resource Center for Refugees to have larger group meetings in our space as well. So that's happening. We have people from the Refugee Center meeting with their clients in the library. Public meeting room use has really dramatically increased since January, since we were able to be open. Last week we had a meeting scheduled, at least one meeting in all of our meeting rooms. One night I think we had 3 things scheduled, including the library board meeting. So we're way more active and way more involved, which is great.
And we come back, I'm going to ask you what you've got on your nightstand book-wise.
Oh, great.
All right.
That's a good one.
Chris Sagaasor is our guest. We're talking books. We're talking Utica Library. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Chris Sagaasor is our guest. He is the director of the Utica Public Library, has been since 2017. What's on your nightstand? What are you reading now?
Well, I usually have something that's kind of work-related and something that's not work-related. I just picked up a book called Overdue, A Reckoning with the Public Library, which is kind of a deep dive into the state of affairs in the public library, written by a former public librarian who burnt out, I believe. And then, because April is National Poetry Month, I have the collected poems of Wendell Berry, my favorite author, so I can read those out loud in the morning with my coffee.
Good. I read 2 different things, too. It's interesting that you do that. I always have 2 books going, one nonfiction and one fiction. So I try to learn from one and I try to enjoy from the other. What have you got coming up this summer?
Well, we have a lot. Actually, we just finished a couple different art shows. The Utica City School District Art Show
upstairs.
Upstairs in our gallery space on the 2nd floor. That's where a lot of this stuff is happening. We are having Munson William, the Pratt, I believe, African American Student Alliance show. I think that's getting hung this week. Then, starting in June, actually We currently have also in our boardroom Martha Deming. She's a local watercolorist. We have a selection of her works hung right now. In June, we are starting June into the middle of July. We're having the Mountain Air Painter Society exhibit. That's going to be in multiple rooms on our second floor. In July, we're also hosting the District 5 Garden Club Flower Show. That's going to take up most of the second floor, some of the first floor. That's on Boilermaker weekend. We did that last year and had about 500 people come through over 2 days.
Yeah.
They're expecting, and so are we, about double of that this year, so we're excited about that. I know I'm forgetting stuff. We have summer reading coming this summer too, so there's going to be a lot more in-person performances and entertainment and educational events for kids. And I'm sure I'm going to forget something. We're also hosting, the Landmark Society in August is doing their walking tour. We're a stop on that.
Oh, good.
And then we're actually hosting Halloween in October, which is a Catholic Charities fundraiser. They're going to do that in the library. We tried to do it in 2020, got canceled. 2021 got canceled. So we're really hoping that this year that it's going to happen. So
Is there a name for the room upstairs, the gallery room?
We really just call it our gallery.
Yeah.
The boardroom was called the music room because they stored music in there and sometimes performed music. But one of the things we did do when we were shut down, we reorganized a lot of our interior spaces, spruced up a lot of our meeting rooms. So the building looks really great, better than it did when we had to shut down, which is awesome. I'm sure I'm forgetting another event because I tried to tick them off. Really busy summer for us.
Good. The gallery room is just a great venue. I mean, that's just a nice sized room. I've been in concerts up there. Very nice.
Yeah, and one of the things we need to do is clean all the interior skylights that are underneath the exterior skylights, which we refinished and rehabbed last year, because over the years, there actually isn't a way to get to some of them, so we have to figure out how to get to them, clean off the skylights inside the roof so that we get even more natural light into those interior spaces.
The genealogy room, is that open?
Yep, genealogy room. Right now we have 2 volunteers a week. In the summer we have a couple more people come. We still need to figure out the best space for that. We think we're going to move it. We just haven't been able to figure out where and when. It's going to be a significant undertaking. But we would like to have a situation where all of the public resources that people want to use for research and information gathering are on our first floor, where the bulk of our staff is able to assist. And then the second floor would be meeting rooms. We have business groups that come in and rent our space. We have a wedding. Actually, that's another thing that's happening. We have a wedding using our lobby on New Year's Eve at the end of this year. So we want to attract more varied use of our space as a revenue generator for the library. We're cognizant of the fact that taxpayers fund the preponderance of our work, as well as some generous individual donors. We need to find new ways so that we don't tax literally the tax base. So that's what we're working toward.
Are there fundraisers in the offing?
Well, that's one of the things we don't necessarily. Our feeling, we think that using our space for others to fundraise might be a better use of our capacity. As you know, there are a lot of organizations that do fundraisers that don't necessarily have the same type of physical plant and staffing component we do. We like to be a good neighbor to those who rely on fundraisers already. So that's kind of where we're at. Mm-hmm. I think our return on investment, we have to look at that. It's not being ruled out, but it's not top of mind like some of these other.
Yeah, speaking of fundraisers, you and I and a whole bunch of other people are going to be together on May 18th at the United County History Center.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for the annual telethon, which is the signature fundraiser for the History Center, and it's going to be right here on WUTR. What about funding from government? I know you took a hit from Oneida County, right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we lost over $250,000 in revenue over the course of 2 fiscal years, had to lay off a third of our staff, all of whom are back. County funding rebounded. County Executive Pacenti and the legislature value our services. They understand that they don't come for free. They come at no cost, essentially, to the people who come in and use them, but we did receive a rebound in our funding from the county. New York State funding actually increased this year. One of the things we did during COVID was figure out what can we get by without and still provide top-notch public service. So I believe we talked about it on this show when I was on during COVID, how you can always find a place to cut. And we cut significantly in areas that we hadn't considered cutting before, but I think we're a stronger, leaner organization than we were 2 years ago.
What about the condition of the building? You mentioned the skylights, but I know a few years ago, new windows were put in.
Yep.
That building goes back to when?
03 it was started construction and opened in 04, yeah. I mean, it's still really robust and really strong. Things like, our water heater just died last week. We have significant maintenance costs, but we have preventive maintenance contracts for all of the major items. We still have things we still would love to be able to put a new ADA elevator in, a new ADA restroom. We want to fix our chimney, but the building is not in disrepair. It's just constantly being taken care of.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks
Always
for having
a pleasure to see you, and I'll see you on May 18th. That's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. Don't forget cnyhomepage.com. Lots of good stuff there. Until next time, take care of yourself, everybody.